Rick, and this is your seat at the table, and we are talking all things BattleTech, MechWarrior, etc. In this particular entry, I'm looking at something called Interstellar Players. I'd actually seen these things a while back, and I chose. I figured they really weren't something I was interested in because, once again, when you can't go to a game store to pick something up from a shelf and then to flip through the pages to see what's in there, you kind of do a little bit more due diligence. You got to dig into them a little bit to see exactly what they are. I thought this was just a bunch of character bios and NPCs, literally players for your game, and I didn't really get a good idea what's in it. Then once I did, I thought, geez, I want to get this, and I looked into this particular book, and I got it for 20 bucks. It's actually used, and it's in very good shape for being used. I mean, there's a little bit of issues with it, but nothing is quite functional as far as I'm concerned. I also been working on a different video that I want to do. Why are there so many mediocre mech designed? But I haven't quite got that to the stage I want. And yeah, believe it or not, I do write down a quote, what would be a script and or notes, but it's not complete enough for me just yet. So I wanted to look into these things. The other thing, like I've said before, I'm not a fan of PDFs. And the reason I'm not a fan is, once again, this is quite convenient for me. I can take this with me to work. I can have it in my work truck and not worry about it. I can throw it in my, take it with me to the bathroom or somewhere else where I know I'm going to be sitting in line somewhere. And it's much more convenient than trying to take along my laptop to do a PDF. PDFs, once again, as you know, have to have a medium in order to be played on. And I don't own a notepad or an iPad or anything of that nature because, frankly, I don't have that kind of resources. I just don't have the money to support. The laptop is something you have to replace every few years, and it's a struggle to do that. I mean, what you can't see is sitting directly behind us is actually the laptop I've had prior to this one that was from 2 years ago. I bought this one with some of that STEM package money, stimulus that we got a year and a half back or so. And so in another year, I'll have to get another laptop because they get quirky as they get older and software issues, etc., etc. So in order to have the second book in this series, which is the Jihad, I have to do a PDF because I couldn't forward the copy of the hardback copy. Catalyst does not sell it, and in any form other than PDF, as best I can tell. And in order to order one off the internet, the cheapest one I saw was on eBay for like $90. I can't spend 90 bucks for a game book. It had to be one spectacular book for me to really bite the bullet, because in order to order these things, I put them on a credit card that's already heavily tapped, and so it just adds to the burden of having to pay these things back. So I've actually been pretty generous to myself the past couple of weeks and ordered a number of books that I really want to have for my collection, but at the same time I really can't afford to do it, and it is what it is. So I had no choice. I got the PDF version, and for me, once again, a PDF, in order to get a PDF, I have to then print it out and put it into a notebook like this. And there's something less impressive than when you look at your bookcase and you got a pile of these things versus a pile of these things. And these things tend to take up much more space. Just look at, about the same page count in this book that's in this book, but we're talking, just added into it, and it is what it is. So I was grateful to get them, and I have it's a bit stuffy in here. It's muggy as all get out outside, and I got the air going, but this room doesn't get a lot of good ventilation, so I'm sweating a bit. I'm not keen on it. I'm just saying. Not that you guys care. And I got myself a coffee. We had to run some errands this morning for my employer, and then anyway. So what I found interesting about these things is, if you've read them, then you know what they are. They are potential third-party organizations and conspiracy, or I use the term, not conspiracy, organizations, cults, movements, whatever, that can be found potentially anywhere in the inner sphere and beyond, and then you decide as the game master whether or not you're going to incorporate these in your game, or your gaming group decides that we're going to utilize these things, because some of them, Illuminati, oh, I know how to pronounce the word, it's just not on my damn Illuminati. There you go. So I just like these. They're very interesting material, and I think it's worthy of exploring some of this on an individual basis. I mean, if we look at the book itself, we've got this in the first installment. We've got the 6th of June, which is famous for anybody that's read a lot of the BattleTech, the Fourth Succession War through the current or latter clan invasion, 30, 50, 30, 60, etc. Inside of Word of Blake, the Illuminati, the Iran corporate cabal, interstellar expeditions, Genecaste, Brotherhood of Cincinnatus, the Extrudi, the One Star Faith, the Bounty Hunter, Davion Warriors Cabal, and then a bunch of minor groups. And so, and then, this one adds even more. So that adds flavor and depth to the system that's already. This is one of the reasons I don't like when I sweat. When I get sweat, then everything starts to fog up, and then I have trouble reading. It's just the same reason when we all had to wear the damn masks, and I had a horrible time using my glasses when I had to wear a mask. It's not about inconvenience, it's about practicality. I mean, I get the importance of those things. I wore them because it's important. They were important, very important at the time. They still didn't make, as I'm sure you know, they were a pain in the ass. That's just my personal opinion. So, babbling on and on and on. I'm going to get on to the one I wanted to deal with today in this video, is called the Genecaste. Genecaste, if you're not familiar with this, and I wish I was trying to find artwork so I could basically put up so you wouldn't have to see the down view, point of view stuff. I mean, there's a value in this format we're using right now because you can see what it is I'm looking at. But at the same time, it's nice to be able to have just art up there, and because a lot of times, I don't know about anybody else, but most of these talking head videos, I can take or leave the talking head part. I don't mind listening to the contents of the material, because I'm at work and I'll tap into something like this. And like I've said before in other videos, I listen to my own material because A, I want to make sure that I covered what I thought I wanted to cover. B, it always gives me ideas other things. C, to remind myself just how crappy my videos can be. And for majority of people who tap in and view my videos and they only see a short bit because your attention span's crap, or because it just isn't something you're interested in, hey, I get that. That's fully understandable. Our society is a 2-second society anyway. If it lasts more than 5 minutes, most people tune out. But this isn't for them. This is for people like myself who have we're working on another project and just want to hear things being discussed about this hobby that we enjoy, particularly this particular genre. So BattleTech enthusiasts who are working on painting a project or working on something else or fixing their car or driving to work could tap into these videos and listen to them at their convenience. And the fact that there are not a lot of them out there, plenty of YouTube creator content, great stuff. Majority of it, though, very short. And they're catering to an audience and a specific set of algorithms for YouTube. Hey, I get it. I get it. I will never get 10,000 subscribers. The odds of that happening, I could put a video out a day and somehow I still wouldn't get on that YouTube algorithm train. There's a formula for having to do this, and if you can do it, you can do it well. That's how you become a video influencer or a video whatever. So be it. Fact is, we broke 400 on my subscriptions, and I'm utterly grateful for those guys, you guys and gals who have joined the channel in the last couple of weeks. Then it bumped me up over 400. I mean, awesome stuff. I really never expected my channel to even get this many. I remember when I first started and I had like 10 people for a long time. I think I had less than 20 subscribers for the first year of my channel, and it's got to do with the contents and what we're putting in it. And there's a lot of videos that I did early on for other game systems and stuff, and other related stuff to game systems that meant something at the time, but really didn't have any substance or any legs to it. So I've tried to avoid some of those. I mean, I know I'm still struggling with my inability to just be straight, direct to the point, and keeping even when I write a quote script, I always go off script because that's my nature and that's who I am. Anyway, paranoid fantasy or horrific reality. This makes sense to me. I've always, the first time I started hearing about the clans, and I started reading up on the clans and their genetic legacy and their genetic manipulation of their own gene pool. So the entire, basically, as you well know, that the entire labor case or warrior case and the elite case clans are vat born. They're genetically engineered and their DNA is manipulated to create strains of desired traits, and then they have artificial birthing methods to take the organic materials from the men and the women and combine them in the lab and create what they believe is a superior being. So through the testing process, an average Sabiko can be between 25 and 50 quote babies, and they don't necessarily all from the exact same blood pool or bloodline, but they have a tendency to be pretty closely related. Through extensive testing, they weed out the weak and the less inspired of these individuals till they get it down to a very small group. And then that small group competes with themselves to the death in many cases to earn the right to be in the warrior case. Those who test out, most of them are regulated to a lower caste, as you well know. They either go depending on their aptitudes and their intelligence and their skill sets and their inclinations, they can end up in the merchant case or the technician's case or scientist case, etc. In worst case, they end up in the labor class. And even though, and I suspect even the ones who end up in the labor case end up in high level positions because they're true born, as opposed to being, quote, freeborn, which is completely looked down upon in their society. So, if you have the means to manipulate the genetics of the human DNA to improve, how far do you take it? There's that moral quandary, that gray area that leads from the light to the dark, where you can push the boundaries and push the boundaries and push the boundaries until you get to something you have to either decide as a society this is no longer acceptable and we do not, or undesirable, and move on. And then what do you do if there's individuals or small groups within your society that keep pushing the envelope? And that they don't have this in mainline clans is understandable, because it really becomes something other than, and I don't want to say less than human. The Genecaste in their various forms are obvious evolutions of the technology path that the eugenics program of the clans would go upon. And it's just not to say that the humanity wouldn't have done this anyway. That's something important to take into account. When the Star League fell, before it fell, genetic engineering and genetic research was in full bloom. It's something that's mentioned here and there in the lore, but it's not something that's deeply covered for good reasons. There's a lot of things that don't really need to be covered because they don't. We're not looking at a real world society, so we don't have to really have all the nuts and bolts of how the mechanics of things work in order for them to work. See, so that's being said, that when the clans, the SLDF made its exodus, they took copies of every data core, every library, every bit of knowledge that they could get their hands on in the year prior to the exodus and took it with them. And the lion's share of that technology and knowledge persisted. It survived the Pentagon Wars and the formation of the clans and etc. etc. So they cherry picked what technology they chose and wished to improve on, and continued doing some purely theoretical research, but very little of it. Majority of it was focused primarily on increasing the war machine's ability to fight war and to engineer the perfect warrior class. The rest of it was considered non-viable or not wanted, so they were officially not supposed to be dabbling in that sort of thing. It's one of those things. The many questions I've always had about the SLDF Exodus and the scenario where the clans end up. The homeworlds, for the most part, are crap. They are very marginal. There's a few that are a little above marginal, but the majority of them are either resource poor, environmentally poor, or a constant struggle to survive on in any significant society numbers. So, we also don't have an exact number of how many other worlds the clans expanded to and settled and conquered. Statistically speaking, if we use the inner sphere as an example, probably 20% or so of the 22,000 odd settled worlds, officially 2,200 odd settled worlds in the inner sphere, about 20% of them would be Terran-like. The atmosphere is suitable, the temperature range is suitable, the gravity is suitable, plants and animals, organic things grow on it in various numbers, so we might have entire planets devoted to a desert or to ice fields or to an ocean or to an actual, Earth-like environment. But then the bulk of the other planets have issues and that range from extreme to modest. So there's no reason why that the clans couldn't have found better worlds to settle. And they may very well have, in the process of making that exodus, passed over a number of very suitable locations, because Kerensky was I don't want to say Alexander Kerensky was paranoid. He was just very adamant that they put as much distance between them and the inner sphere as possible. And at the end of the day, all this talk about the clans returning as the ill clan to recapture Terra, I always thought that was just a bedtime story fed to the clans, the people of the former SLDF, to give them that idea that we actually have a plan for our existence, as opposed to Kerensky's true plan, which was just to get as far away from the inner sphere as possible, so that the quote corrupting influences of the inner sphere's politics and media and social mindset would not pass on to his descendants, and for him to create an actual ideal Star League, which the clans fail utterly at. I mean, I'm just being brutally honest. Alexander's son Nicholas corrupted his dad's concept and ideas, partly because Alexander did a piss poor job of planning the next stage and what we will do now that we're here, because he really didn't have a plan. And then he was just focused on trying to keep everybody functioning and together and to keep everything from turning into what it turned into anyway. So Nicholas came out with a completely radical concept that actually took hold. I mean, if you really look at things, the people were desperate. They needed leadership. They needed the goals. They needed structure. Nicholas provided them with that, the tenets and foundations of what he envisioned the clans to be. And there we go. Ergo, there we go. So in that particular process of developing the perfect warrior, we have this cutting edge technology in genetic manipulation and eugenics. Once again, I want to touch on the fact that this is not a technology that was solely invented or perfected by the clans, because we know from lore, especially now, that, and these books are considered lore. You choose as a player, decide whether or not to incorporate these into your version of BattleTech. But the fact is, these are lore because they're accepted by the game company, and thankfully Catalyst honors the previous lore that was created by other franchise owners, which has helped keep the game consistent, which is what sets it apart from a lot of other game systems. And I've rambled on about that a number of times. So. Out of all the inner sphere and periphery nations, it's the Magistrate Canopus that has the most sophisticated medical program. for whatever reason, this periphery nation managed to retain the same medical concept levels that existed at the end of the Star League and continue to maintain and support and to grow on them. So their understanding of genetic manipulation is quite extensive. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, that we kind of talk about, and either we glaze over it, ignore it, or we don't pay attention. But if you listen to some of the quote stories that come out of the magistrate, especially in the older days, they actually talked about genetically manipulated human beings, mer people, centaurs. You don't get that sort of level of artificial creation constructs because nowhere in the history of Battletech does the level of sophistication for robotics extend to the point of making quote droids, let alone things like cyborgs. So they literally had to have genetically altered living human beings to create these, for lack of term, monstrosities or these curiosities in order to cater to some pretty eclectic tastes within their clientele and in their own very hedonistic society. Now, that it's not something that we've touched on a whole lot. It's been played out. It's kind of been pushed off the side. But the fact was, it is lore. It is there. And there's also this subtle talk and in the corners that some of the magistrate's family herself, the leadership of the magistracy, are actually genetically engineered to be what they are, to be superior in leadership and attractiveness, and so their natural charisma has been scientifically enhanced. And it's been careful through at some point in their history that there's clear that there's been some genetic gene case material stuff going on. So if you take the next step, and this is what Genecaste does. So at some point, the scientist case, which is nearly as powerful as the warrior case. The only thing that keeps the scientist case from overtaking and supplementing the warrior case in the clans is the warrior case. The warrior case will obliterate them at the first hint that they are stepping out of line from, quote, Kerensky's vision. But within their own confines, within their own society, the scientists have an extreme amount of free range to do pretty much what they want. They want to research things. They want to develop things that are way outside the box. There's not a whole lot of checks and balances in the society, in clan society, that will put a stop to it unless somehow it becomes endangering the society as a whole. Extremely radical problems that could create social unrest amongst the society, the clans, and are a direct threat to the warrior case themselves. So if you get around that, or you just keep them isolated from them elements, the scientist case can get away with doing a lot of stuff that we're not aware of. And I've speculated this a few times before in the past. I've always suspected that Team Bonsai has some sort of connection to the scientist case of the clans prior to the invasion of clans of the Inner Sphere. I honestly believe that between the merchant clans, the clans merchant case, and the scientist case, that there has been some very tentative, low-key interaction between the clans' homeworlds and the Inner Sphere elements within. I can't prove it. I don't have any lore to back that up, but it's just something I believe in. I like to believe. It's my own personal conspiracy. So if you have the means to genetically engineer humanity, and we know the technology to radically engineer technology or human beings exists in the Battletech universe, then the odds of them, especially in the clans, having tried to find ways to enhance humans' ability to survive on some of those very marginal worlds makes perfectly good sense. And it's a slippery slope. We start with this, and then we start with this, and next we move to this, then we get to this really radical environment. Next thing you know, we have engineered our own, quote, aliens. Once again, this is a touchy subject within Battletech, because Battletech is all about human struggle and human foibles and human triumphs. There has never been a need for or a true desire for alien beings. And in some aspects, the alien beings that are man-made creations would fit in that category. So my own would-be game system, Stellar Frontiers, the big basis of that is that humanity has absolutely no morals or no qualms about adapting humanity to fit in an environment. It's the yin and yang for terraforming. We build and design the technology just like they did in BattleTech that allows us to terraform a world, to bring a marginal or even less than a marginal world to standards that we can work in and live in and operate in a shirt sleeve environment and breathe without equipment and grow food and so on and so forth. Well, the opposite side of that technology would be then to develop humanity that can plug into a world and adapt to a world because of other issues. So if you look at many worlds, and I brought this up in like the Ghost Worlds video and a couple others over the past, is what makes a world marginal for human settlement isn't always clear cut. You can have a planet that has the right temperature range, the right atmosphere, and then there's something specific in the atmosphere, in the environment that's toxic to humans. If we can adapt humans to tolerate that issue, we then just opened up that particular world. Or it's just like if we can truly create quote mer people that can live and operate in and out of the water, then we can create people who live totally in the water, and then we've opened up entire regions of various planets that we would have been forced to use a lot higher levels of technology. Why would you do that? Why would you create a human being who can live in a thin atmosphere with a light gravity planet and thrive as if he was on Earth? Well, once again, the adapting the planet is going to be far more expensive than adapting a race of humans. The adapting the planet is faster. You're going to be able to terraform a world much faster than you're going to be able to create a genetic manipulation, ideally, that can inhabit the world. Except the clans use technology to speed this up. So we're not talking a one-on-one case. I'm going to develop a mer person who can live in and out of the water, and I'm going to have multiple generations in order for them to grow in sufficient numbers to be a viable society. Well, if I have the technology that allows me to birth hundreds, thousands of individuals in a fairly short amount of time, then I'm going to expedite this. So instead of it taking literally hundreds and hundreds of years or 1,000 years of 30 or 40 generations to get a world full of mer people, potentially it could take decades, maybe a century at the most. You can using that technology and continually using that technology. So the fact is that's what this is covering. So we got the Genecaste, which is pretty messed up, and I'm not going to go in here and read all the stuff because it reads like a conspiracy. They've got bits and pieces of something from a person's experience, and the readers are examining the information and trying to come up with some ideas, right? So we'll see here. So what do we have here? Pretty skimpy and chaotic information, right? I read it over and listened to it at least 24 times, and I'm still not convinced it's anything but a brilliantly played hoax. If that's not wacky enough, I just got one better to keep you scratching your noggin for long nights to come. I've heard of this guy for a while, this Roken Manol. One certifiable exobiologist. This is the guy spouting off about Homo pig sapiens on folly, sentient chicken people out in the periphery, and let's not forget the aliens that live in the hyperspace. He's been shooting off about the Genecaste for a while now. Says he stumbled on them in the deep periphery and lived among them for years. Now, most folks dealing with the galactic insulator don't bother making eye contact. They just head for the nearest drop port fast as they like before this guy can sell them beachfront property on Tharkad. However, a contact of mine happened to send me a brochure, and though most of what it makes you spit Java out of your nose, well, it happens to jive just enough with what I've dug up myself, so I've had to include this as well. As Alice says, curiouser and curiouser. Signed, Lefty. So what we have is these very exclusive hints, and then this one particular scientist by the name of Roland McAnole, who created the Genecaste, the real story. It talks about the clans. A complete write-up of the Society of the Genecaste is beyond the scope of this brochure. Please send me about. Right. The Genecaste is not a monolithic entity ruled by a single person or council. Instead, it is comprised of a large number of gene clans, each composed of anywhere from a few dozen to thousands of individuals. These gene clans are not based on astrogeography, bloodlines, or ideologies. Instead, the gene clans are built around environments, and the gene forms are within the given gene clan to adapt said environment. Another way to think of the gene clans is as colonies, each based on a different environment and the special circumstances and gene forming required to adapt to it. For example, a gene caseman adapted to underwater living cannot live on land in ultralight gravity or in vacuum, just as the light gravity gene caseman would find it unbearable, if not deadly, to dwell on a high gravity world. These things are considered, if these exist, if you accept that these exist, and I propose that they do, because they just the sort of crap that humanity would do. And don't kid yourself. There are a lot of people in our modern society that has no problems delving into things that majority of society believe is morally or physically or spiritually wrong. So, and if you have the technology, you have the knowledge, you have the specialists, you have the secrecy, you have everything you need to justify this sort of stuff going on. Now, it also goes in here to say the clans proper, the warrior caste specific, will eradicate these Genecaste clans in a heartbeat. If they can find them, if they can prove that they exist, if they can locate where they're at, they eliminate them, because they're aberrations of everything that makes them what they are. They are not proper trueborns in their minds. And there's also that possibility that, through all the careful genetic manipulation in a program such as what the clans use, can still have its own unexpected results or aberrations. You can decant human beings that are grossly deformed in some way, and I imagine most of them would be put down pretty fast, and that's just the way they go. So to say that a handful of them might not, because of some sympathetic person in the program decides to let that baby live, and then smuggles that baby out to some environment that's suitable for that baby, just one of the possibilities. So this is a subcase. The Genecaste recognizes several different subcases, different categories of physical appearance. The Genecaste determines how much respect an individual is due and how much influence a Genecaseman can exert amongst a particular gene clan. Although the gene form technically do not aid or hinder leadership, the ambitious, sufficiently talented, charismatic genome can rise to the top of the leadership structure. So we have the alt form, apparently a term for non-Genecaste gene form groups. This would be people that are born, that look like people, and all intents and purposes are people. It's just that in their genetic code, they have the genetic code markers that's related to the Genecaste that they came from. These are the least popular amongst the Genecaste because they're the least trusted, but they're the most likeliest agents and spies and persons that they can utilize to keep track on the rest of clan society and what's going on. Gene norms. They're considered the lowest of the low, akin to free births among the warrior caste, etc. First form. First form Genecasemen display no outward modifications. All results of genetic manipulation lie beneath the skin, undetectable to human eye. First form casemen are most often sent out to spy on the various factions of the intersphere clans. Second form casemen show slight alterations to their physical appearance, strange looking eyes, odd ears, slight webbing in the hands and feet, and so on. Second form casemen usually have specific abilities that surpass those of the first form casemen and are often sent on specific missions despite the slight possibility of detection. Third form. Third form case may appear radically altered in some way. For example, they may have drastically extended arms. In general, only a specific part of the third form gene casement is changed, leaving the rest of the body's appearance normal. The third form's modifications make him more effective at specific endeavors, and so the third forms may be sent on certain covert missions requiring a particular skill, but they find it difficult to hide their gene forms. Fourth form. Case may take on the simple gene forms of the third form, but their display changes across the entire body, such as chitinous skin. Fifth form case may are the ultimate expression of genetic modification to adapt to an environment. Stick figures with wings for the use in ultralight gravity worlds, multi-limbed and squat forms for ultra-heavy gravity worlds, finned, eyeless, blubbery specimens for underwater, living the fifth form take their genetic form level to a level that alters their physical appearance almost beyond recognition. So you can see just how extreme the various options are, or how far this may or may not have gone. And then they have a discussion, a bit of a disagreement in here about whether or not the fourth and fifth gene form are plausible, because ideally a few hundred years is not sufficient amount of time to genetically engineer that radical of a being. But I tend to agree with one side of the discussion, because if you have the technology to birth babies in lab, then you have the means to speed up this and to continue genetically manipulating. So if you create generation A and it has the very tiny amount of what you're looking for, you immediately take the best from that best samples from A and decant and start a new form B. And so we don't have to wait for the newly born infant to grow up into a viable human before we start the next grouping. So potentially you're doing these things you're expediting the process. So it's plausible that with technology and the science capabilities that they sped things up considerably. So there are possibilities that these do exist, especially within their own societies, if that's their goal. When I first read this, one of the first things that came to mind was Dune. If you are any bit familiar with Dune itself, genetic manipulation of human beings is common. This is common because of the Valerian jihad that eradicated the AI, thinking machines. And they mandated after that there would never be another artificially devised machine that could mimic or operate in the function of a human being. So that's where they had to genetically create and chemically create individuals to do things like being a walking, living computer, or the mentats, as an example. Or the real radical would be the navigators for the spatial guilds. These things are still human, but they are so radically altered and changed to suit the needs and desires of the Spacious Guild that they in no way whatsoever can be considered human. They can't function as human beings. They can't function outside of very specific atmosphere that's heavily laced with melange, and generally speaking, so it's just, that's the level of genetic manipulation they're suggesting for Battletech. For the average Battletech player and fan, this is radical, off the chart, scientific, sci-fi stuff, and it doesn't really have a solid place in the game as we play it and as we know it. This is so fringe, it makes the fringe look normal. And it's not something I could figure that the game system could. They put it in here because the obvious conclusion is this is the extreme example of what could happen or what may have happened with the genetic research and development that the clan's been pursuing for the last 250 odd years. So the odds are we're not going to find entire worlds with millions of mer people that are going to swarm out of their watery based drop ships to invade our planet's oceans. That's just, but to find the extremely, you really got a battle. You got a group of players who are big into mech or big into the role playing part of mech warrior, and you have them go off down a rabbit hole. This is one of those boogeyman kind of things that potentially has for an interesting encounter or two, and a mystery that it ideally can never be properly solved and should never come to light, and would always be blown away by the norms as you're out of your loving mind kind of thing. So, I mean, it's something else. Meanwhile, they cover some of the obviouses in here as well. The Genecaste themselves are extremely aware to the point of paranoia that their own that the original clans will eradicate them at the first hint of a colony. If they can find them, these aberrations of what everything that makes the iron womb process what it is, these things need to be eradicated because they are extreme examples of something that's not clan-like, despite the fact that they are clan, that they are descendants of the clan, or they are spin-offs of the clans, the clanners themselves. Extreme. The same reason why you would never find these things in the vast numbers, and these things are going to, it says it right in here, they tend to gravitate to extreme environments that are very unlikely to attract human interest, which includes worlds that are very resource poor, because obviously if you find a world, no matter even if it's an airless moon and it has some sort of easily to get to mineral resources that the inner sphere can use and does use, and it has a value, then there's this increased chance of human beings coming here to mine and exploit that resource, which means that they would then have a much harder time hiding, the Genecaste would, which should also be the genesis for the occasional encounter. So if your unit is sent on a mission and for some reason it gets itself into a planet that nobody's ever been to before, the environment's very extreme, and suddenly one of your sentries starts babbling about a six-legged thing with a man head coming up out of the dark and grabbing their partner and hauling him off for some God knows unknown reason. There you go, right? Just saying. So when we get into the section and how would these break these down, we're talking the story, the bits and pieces of the smuggled information, the official, quote, brochure created by what everybody considers as a crackpot scientist, inner sphere crackpot scientist, and more in-depth detail of Genecaste themselves if you choose to incorporate them in some manner into your game system. And then we have the Game Master section. To capture the flavor of the Genecaste, it's important to note that they are not the grotesque, tentacled, blubbering monsters shown in B movies about what happens to humans attempting to genetically manipulate the human genome. Such as an image not only leaves little room for adventure and prospects beyond killing the horror, it also requires little imagination, does not lend itself to the development of a unique and interesting society. Although such genetic horrors likely did result with the beginning, some of them still turn up now and then. They are ruthlessly destroyed, unless the fault can be proven to be unevocably, to the rare exceptions that might escape with or without help, retain the intelligence and cunning of a human, making them infinitely more dangerous than any alien fauna. Just as spheroids and clanners use their technologies to create tailor-made equipment for conquering inhospitable planets, the Genecaste will use their technology to gene form their own bodies to accomplish the same tasks. Where a spheroid uses IR goggles to see in the dark, a Genecaste may have cat-like eyes to achieve the same goal. Although monstrous to spheroid and even clan sensibilities, the Genecaste have their own views on what they are and where they are going, regardless of how, quote, alien they have become. This unique culture can be allowed to blossom into exotic, exciting adventures that stretch the boundaries of what players are accustomed to in the Battletech universe. So, how to use the Genecaste, the goals of the Genecaste military, which is almost non-existent, and flat out they're just creepy. Militarily speaking, there's nothing, they emphasize this, that the Genecaste individually and collectively are not military minded. They do not field armies, they do not field warships, they do not field dropships full of mechs, they don't field mechs. Generally they do have some small weapons, small arm weapons, hand-to-hand weapons. They have specific individuals or gene-created individuals, their own versions of warriors. These are to protect their little colonies and their enclaves from not just from everyday dangers of things, and from the potential for being discovered by the inner sphere or the clans and facing eradication. The lion's share of that time that occurs, and they have the chance to do so, they'll just vacate. They'll leave this and find another location that's suitable to their needs, if at all possible. This means they do use technology. They have access to jump ship technology and drop ships. So the odds are probably against them actually building and manufacturing and producing these themselves. So they acquire them from the clans in the inner sphere, from the merchant case, from traders, or they take them. Things disappear all the time in the deep periphery. This might be one of those things that's caused those things to disappear. Right? They also have some very specialist gene case and that can become assassins or hunters or whatever to help protect themselves. But for the lion's share, they're going to the gene normals, or the first case, specifically the first case, are likely to be found inside the inner sphere or the clans within their command and control structures. Importantly, to spy on them and to keep an ear open for the possibility of their gene case being discovered. They're not there to manipulate the clans or the inner sphere or involve themselves in politics, etc. This is not to say on an individual case basis that the first form or second form gene case couldn't be doing that, but this isn't their goals. That's not their intent. So anyway, this is Rick and another babbling video on the concept of gene manipulation and how extreme that this sort of thing can be taken if you really want it to go, and how it could be played in the Battletech universe. Till next time, this is Rick, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.